So this is Ray with School of Racing Graphics. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create an inner drop shadow on text or numbers. I had somebody request in the SRGFX Facebook group that I would do it on number set 16. So that's what I'm going to do with the number 16. But it's really universal. So like any number set you're using or font or anything, the idea is pretty universal. You won't have to do anything typically different except for maybe the size. So I'm going to show you two different ways. The first way is going to work in basically any design software that's vector based. And then the second way I'm going to show you is going to be a slightly more complicated, but will be Adobe Illustrator specific and will also, you can modify it when you modify the shape of your number and it'll follow along, so you won't have to recreate the drop shadow or the inner shadow on the number. So before I do that, I'm just going to create a base structure, and my base is going to be red, black, and silver. So we're just going to go ahead and turn this white, and I always like working in global colors, so I'm going to go ahead and click global, switch this over to white. Then I'm going to put a quick outline on it up in the appearance panel. So you'll want to open that. And if you don't know where it is, it's under Windows and Appearance. Everything in here is in alphabetical order. So you go to Appearance, and then I'm going to pop a new fill on this. So add a new fill. And I'm going to drag that one to, it doesn't matter at this point, actually, which one I drag to the bottom, both the same. But I'm going to turn this one black. I'm also going to turn it to a global, and I'm going to bring my values all down to 0 on RGB. And I am working in a pretty large size, so not scaled to anything, but, you know, basically it could be a race car size, not a specific race car size. So it's 25 inches tall. So I'm going to go to Effect, Path, Offset Path, and I'm going to offset path the second fill that I put on the appearance. And we're just going to try, let's see what 2 inches does actually. Okay, that's a little bit thin, so we're going to try 2.5. 2.5 inches. I typically don't like a gap in my numbers here. Like I don't like to see the openings there if I can help it, depending on the number. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a second one on. So I'm going to grab this again. I'm just going to duplicate the black one, and this one I'm going to turn red. And for a second, it's going to cover it. It's not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I turn my red to global in case I want to change this color later easily. And I'm going to offset this path. Instead of 2.5, which is what this one is, I'm going to set it to 0.5 inches. See what that does. Preview it. That looks pretty good. Now, one common problem that I always find with numbers is whatever this thick outline is, you're probably going to want your middle outline or the space in between the two numbers to be pretty similar. So I'm just going to eyeball it. I would usually probably be a little bit more official about this. I'm going to eyeball that space in, but you want a nice thick space between your numbers. Don't close those up. That's one of the common things I give in feedback is not having too narrow of a space between your numbers. And I'm just nudging that over. It's a little thin still. Don't want to spend all day moving this around, but I will move it a little bit. If I hold down Shift, it'll move horizontally. So then I'm going to go ahead and, just because I always like to skew it, but I could skew it either direction. So for now, I'm just going to stick to the standard 25. Like that. And you can probably hear my kids in the background. They are watching TV. It's a snow day here in Springfield, Missouri, which is fun when you want your kids home, but when you want to get work done, it puts a blip in just about everything you're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and move this just a little bit that way and kind of get this space here, similar to this space here. Typically what I'd do is I'd measure it and get it all exactly the same, just create that consistency. Then I'm going to pop one more outline on it, nothing major, but this one's at 2.5, so I'm going to stick this one up at, we'll try 2.75 inches. I always like to work in predictable increments so that I know what I'm looking at. And there we go. I got a nice little kind of silver, and I'm going to set it to global. You could grayscale it if you want to make it easy. to adjust later, because then you can adjust the lightness and the darkness of it. So I'm going to leave it there. And there we go. So now what I'm wanting to do is create the inner shadow. So I had this request in the Facebook group to create an inner shadow on a number, and what's the easiest way to go about it. So the first way I'm going to show you is going to be, again, pretty much it'll work cross-platform, meaning you can use it in Flexi, CorelDRAW, Illustrator, basically any vector design software. Not so much in Photoshop. It would be different. Can still achieve the same effect, but it would be a different way of going about it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to duplicate this so I can keep it live, because I want to use that again later. All right. So first things first, whenever you create live compound shapes or live outlines in Illustrator, you can always just get to a live shape easily by going to expand appearance. And then once you expand appearance, you basically have all the shapes here at your disposal, so you can make cut lines and just be able to modify things in general. So I'm working from that basis on this first instance. Because this is typically how, at the basic level of vector designing with vector shapes, this is how you're going to do it. So I would typically do both my numbers at once. So I would skew one way, skew one the other way, and then set it all up until I got to the point where I had them modified in a different way. Not to make it too confusing, kind of just forget I said that. For now, we're just going to focus on this. So I'm wanting to create that inner offset shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and take this white and I'm going to offset the path. And I'm going to go like, let's say -5 for now and see what that looks like. So you can see it offsets it a little bit. I haven't finalized it yet, but you can see where it's going to offset. You can see where the miter limit is cutting off, right? So I'm going to have to turn that up. So I typically just pop that up to 100. And miter limit is universal. So like no matter where you're at, if you're in FlexiSign, CorelDRAW, no matter where you're at, there's typically going to be, it's typically going to say miter or miter limit. So this is not an Adobe Illustrator specific thing. One thing I don't like is that it's kind of like creating a separate space here for this and for this and for this. So there's like two different shapes for each number. So I'm just going to bring this down to like 3/8 of an inch. So that's 3.75, something like that. And that kind of, see how it brings it all together. So now everything's one shape. Okay. And at first what I want to do, I'm going to have to ungroup this. And it's going to be different in other design softwares, how you offset that path. It might not be called offset path. It might be called inset path. It could be called something different. But I'm assuming that you're familiar enough with your design software that when I just inset that path, you'll know how to do that in your design software, whatever it is. I'm trying to make this not Adobe Illustrator specific as possible. So now I'm going to set this to the color that I want the shadow to be. And so we're going to say light gray. And I'm going to make it a global color. It doesn't have to be spot, but it can be global. Sorry, I'm getting a phone notification. And I'm going to click OK. And now comes the fun part where we're going to make the shadow. So there's two different ways to do this. I could eyeball it, just drag this, and then grab this, and then knock it out. And there's my shadow there. And it looks pretty good. It looks pretty clean. But there's a more consistent way to do it. So I'm going to take this gray shape here, and I'm going to duplicate it over top of the other gray shape. So now I have two of them. So if I move it, you can see I have two. Okay. And I'm going to go to Object and Transform, and I'm going to go to Move because I want to move it. And so I'm going to go ahead and move it 0.25 inches horizontally, and you can see it moved it. And then I'm going to move it 0.25 inches vertically. So now it moved it to the right 0.25 and down 0.25, but I want it to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to do it, let's say 7.5. So 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, just like that. And now I know this line here is the same as this line here and this line here. And so everything is super consistent because that's what I have my numbers at. And it's already done the math for me. It's saying, oh, you're actually moving this at 45 degrees. So that's exactly what I'm doing. And if I wanted to, I could come in here and change this and then say, no, I'm just wanting to do it 2 inches, right? So this is like another way of doing the math. if you want to look at it that way. So I'm going to go back to 0.75 and 0.75, just like so. Click OK. Now I'm going to grab this shape, which is on top, and you can see it's a compound shape. It's nice and clean. It's not grouped together or anything like that. And I'm going to grab the one underneath it, and then I'm going to go ahead and knock it out, which it's called minus front in Adobe Illustrator. It may be called something different in your design software. These other instances will work too, but you'll have extra steps of deleting items out. So I'm going to go ahead and minus front. And there we go. We got our nice, clean inner shadow. When I zoom out, it looks pretty good. And if it's too dark, it's creating too much contrast, just lighten it up a little bit. And you can still see it's pretty dynamic, pretty easy to work with. I always like my shadows to go towards the back direction. So I always assume that the light is coming from the front, and it's going to cast my shadows to the back. So any shadow on the number, if I was going to put one, it would be cast this direction. On the inside, it would be cast this direction. And so I would do the same exact thing. If I was making this for the left side of the car, I would skew it to the left, and then I would duplicate my shapes out using all those increments that I was using. And then I would knock out the front based on 3/4 of an inch horizontally to the back and down. So it would be opposite, right? And then that would be the other side of the car. So that's the, what I would call kind of archaic way. Like there's no, like once you've done it, you've done it. It's made. There's no way to modify it without redoing it. Like if you, let's say like you wanted to put, like a point on this shape here on the 16. Well, now you got to go through and do all of your edits on all your outlines and things like that. And so it's like basically you're like starting over. So right, that's what's called the destructive workflow. Like I can't get back to editing that in any way. So, but it has its plus side. The plus side is that if I wanted to, I could have kept all those paths live like I have over here, and then I could just make my shadow and bring it over, right? And now everything else here is still live. If I just send it to the back. And so when I choose to make that point like this, I can go ahead and then just remake just the shadow at the end without having to remake all these points. The only thing I got to consider is turning my miter limit up so that everything is nice and clean. So I can do that here on the miter limit like that. And you can see that gets a little bit out of hand there. I don't like my points to be out of control. They don't need to be out of control, but you get the basic idea. Then you can come back, expand that. So object, expand appearance, and get your base shape here from the white, and then make your inner shadow again and bring it over. So now I'm going to show you the live way to do it. So getting back to a live construct where everything is just editing all at once. Actually, though there's a convenience to this, it's actually kind of my least favorite way to do it because it involves strokes instead of offsetting the path. And there's a reason for that, which makes for dirtier shapes when you go to expand it. So instead of filling like I did before and then offsetting the path, I'm just going to use and stack strokes on the outside. So I'm going to grab my white number 16, and I'm going to say add new, nope, not fill. Actually, I already got a stroke on here, so I'll go ahead and turn that black. And I can't remember my exact increments, so I'll get them from over here. So I had 2.5. So that means I need a 2.5 stroke. 2.5 inch stroke. And I'm going to set that to the outside. Okay, so that's on the outside of the number. It's not inset. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to duplicate that stroke, and I'm going to turn this one red. And with it red, I'm going to go ahead and get what my red increment was. So I don't have a good memory. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that one 0.5. Okay. And I'll turn it the same red that I have here. Okay. So that it's nice and dark. I like my reds and my blacks when they're next to each other because they have a lot of the same saturation value. So it makes the number nice and crisp. It didn't it didn't blob out the number. And I talk about that a lot. Like if I was to turn this red yellow, it starts blobbing the number out and making it harder to read. It takes the crispness away. So red is pretty acceptable. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my silver off of here, which is the offset path is 2.75. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this. We're going to go 2.75, and we're going to turn it the silver color like that. Okay, so if you're not really up to speed with what I just did, I'm going to explain it to you. So this one here, minus this drop shadow, is created with all fills, and every shape stacks on top of each other, nice and clean. Okay, like this red is all a solid shape behind the white, meaning if I go object, path, outline, or I'm sorry, object, path, expand appearance, you can see I have a white stacked on top of a red, stacked on top of a black, stacked on top of a silver or a gray. Okay, but with this one, it's different. I used strokes, okay? And these strokes are all stacked on top of the only fill. So the fill is white. And when I turn it off, you can't even see that I turned it off because the background is white. So essentially we're looking at the background right now. So if I was to turn this green, for instance, just to give you an example, you can see I'll turn that off. And then when I turn the eye off on it, you can see it's just going to base. It's going to white, whatever's in the background, okay? And that's because all the strokes are set to the outside. These are not solid shapes. They're a stroke shape, which is very different. So if I was to take this, and we'll go back to white, and I was to expand these shapes, it's going to give me something very different. And so now you can see all these other lines in here because it's all based off of strokes, right? So there's the red, there's the black, there's the silver. Okay, but here's the benefit of it. Okay, this is the benefit, and that's the whole point of the video. And this is about keeping it live in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, your inner shadow is that I can take these strokes and bring them to the top and mask out the inner shadow that's going to happen on the inside of the number. Okay, super important. Okay, because everything here, look, see the difference between these two? Okay, so we'll go back. So now what I'm going to do to achieve the inner shadow on this live, these live outlines is I'm going to go ahead and create another stroke. But this one, instead of setting it to the outside, which you can see right here, I want to set it to the inside. Okay, and so you can see it's red. And I'm going to go ahead and do it. Let's do the 0.75 and see how that looks. Okay. All right, so you can see that's nice and really thick, right? And I want the stroke, the miter limit, to be up to 100. Actually, what did we do? We brought it down to, how did we do the other one? Was it ½ inch? No, it was 3/8 of an inch. So 0.375. Okay. And so, but what I want to do, because I'm trying to create the inner shadow, is I want the stroke to be the white color, not the red color. Okay, so now you can't see it because you got white stacked on top of white, a white stroke on the very top. Think of these almost like layers, okay? This is just the construct of the number here. All right, so I got the white stroke stacked on top of the white fill, and these are all in between. I'm going to bring this white stroke below everything except for the fill. So now this red is going to the outside, this black is going to the outside, and this silver is going to the outside. And so now I want to take this and I want to put a drop shadow on it. And so I'm going to go to stroke, I'm going to click it like that. I'm going to go to effect, and I'm going to go to stylize, drop shadow. Okay. And I don't want it to multiply, I want it to normal. And I'm going to want it to, I don't want it blurred, I want it at 0. And I'm going to go ahead and offset this. Let's set it to 100 for now. I don't know why I'm not getting a preview, the preview option. That kind of stuff always happens. When you go live, like nothing works as expected. Okay, I'm going to tell you why it happened. Because I didn't have the 16 selected. All right, so now with it selected, we're going to go back, do it again. Stylize, drop shadow. And now I'm going to click preview. Okay, but I have it on the wrong thing. So everything's kind of wrong right now. So I'm going to just go ahead and click OK. It doesn't matter. And let's see. the drop shadow landed on everything. This is actually a good teachable moment. So I meant to put it on the white stroke, and I meant for the white stroke to be down here. So I'm going to move the white stroke back where I wanted it. I actually accidentally undid it and put it back on top. I got to make sure I have the 16 selected. That's a key part, okay? So the two whites on top of each other. Now I'm going to take this drop shadow. I'm just going to drag it to the stroke, okay? And now you can see the drop shadow is casting a drop shadow just for the stroke. All right, so I'm going to go ahead in here, and I'm going to want to edit this. So we're going to go 0.5, 0.5. And again, I didn't select my 16, so it's going to do nothing. So 0.5, 0.5. Okay, just like that. And you can see there's a limit. Like I can go so far until the drop shadow is starting to show the other side of the shape. So if I want it to be thicker, I would just take this stroke and turn it up. So go to stroke. Let's go to 0.4 for now. We'll go 4.5. Not quite like that. And that thickens up not only the white shape, but it also thickens up the drop shadow. So now I'm going to take the drop shadow and I'm going to back it off just a little bit, and we'll go 4.5. And that'll clean everything up. So now all of our lines are nice and clean. You don't see it shooting out. Because if I go too far, like let's say that what I'm trying to get away from, if I go too far, then you see that you begin to see this and these little things here, which become problematic. It makes it not look clean, and we don't want that. So we want to go 4.5, 4.5, okay, like that. And I can still see a little bit right there, so I could probably go like 4.3. That. Okay. And then the drop shadow is super dark. I never like my drop shadow to be super dark. So what I do in Illustrator is I find the one I want to be my shadow. So let's say we're going to do this guy here. I'm going to turn him global, and I'm going to call it something really distinct, inner shadow. That way I can find it super easy when I want to go get it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my 16 again, grab my inner shadow, and then I got to select color. And then I got to go to color swatches, and then I got to find that swatch. And there it is. Super easy to identify because I named it. Imagine if I didn't name it, it would have all these different things in it, right? And I'm going to hit preview, and there you go. You can see it just like that. Okay. And so now all of this is live, meaning I can change the shapes of the 1, change the shapes of the 6, and everything will follow along. The downside is when I expand the shapes, I get all those different stroke shapes instead of solid shapes, which is a lot less friendly to like cutting, vinyl cutting, and things like that, and weeding. And so now it's not that you can't weed it, it's just that there's extra steps to the design process to get it cleaned up so that those shapes are filled in so you can stack your vinyl. Okay. So now if you watch, because I did everything global, like I could take this and I can turn the inner shadow to like a green color like that. And you can see now it changes it. All I did is I clicked on the swatch, and now I can play with this. And now I can take the white color, and I can duplicate this, drag it over here with option and turn it to that, and then brighten this up. And I'm not trying to get to anything specific as much as I'm just trying to give you an example. And now there's that. And then I can take the red and turn it gray or silver or anything like that. Could also take this inner stroke and change it to a different color, something like that, or a white. So anyway, there's things you could do to play with it. So now when I come in here, if I want to put that point back on the 16, I could just take this, move it over here. You see the shadow follows along. Everything's built appropriately. And all the shadows land in the right spot. And if I don't like how these points are acting with the shadow, like it's shooting them too far, I can always just back them off a little bit. Right? Hold down shift, and that gives you a horizontal locking. So I'm holding down shift and moving it, and it's, instead of it being free, it actually holds it into that horizontal movement. Same with this one. Hold down shift. There we go. Just bring it in a little bit. Now I have this little aggressive little spike. I can bring one out on the 1 like that. Put one on the bottom here. that. Can start doing, sorry, my timer for taking out my trash just went off. So now I can take this here, you know, move it out, just do some cooler stuff. These are not necessarily shapes that I would be all excited about making. I like consistency in my numbers. I know some people don't care, but just it gives you a really good idea of what you could do with your inner shadows and how you could build them and construct them in a way that, you know, you can, that it'll follow along. So now I'm not going back and rebuilding my shadow. And the nice thing is, if I was to undo all that, I could take this and transform it. So I'm going to shear, and I'm going to go -25 because that's what I started with. So that gets me back up to base. I'm going to hit Command D because that's going to duplicate the last step I did, which was to shear it. Now I have everything here, and the only thing that's off is my drop shadow. So I come in, edit my drop shadow, and then now instead of being +43, I'm going to go -43 here. And that brings it to the back, and that's already 43 down, 0.43 down, and it brings some decent consistency. I'd probably change some of this, get it back to looking like a 1, but you get the basic idea. And then if I ever did want to get my shapes, I can come back here, expand the appearance, and then ungroup this, and I could actually take my 16 if I wanted to, and I could get back to my base shapes if I needed to for any reason for vinyl cutting. Now, the last step, and this is really important, okay, because this is the part that you might have missed because I didn't actually give it, is these shapes and strokes on top are what's masking the drop shadow. So, for instance, if I didn't put the red on top, you would see the shadow possibly pop down into the black depending on what color it was. So if I was to, for instance, turn off the black and turn off the red, turn off the silver, you can see now the shadow is popping down right here, right? And so, for instance, let's say if the red was underneath the shadow, underneath the stroke with the shadow. Well, now that shadow's casting on there. So we're using, it's kind of a hack, we're using that as a mask to mask out the drop shadow that's on the white stroke. And you can see, even with the red, it still doesn't quite mask it. We need the black as well. So when we turn the black on, it completes masking it, and the silver is just a whole nother just outline just for the sake of having it. So that's the basic premise there around having the live inner shadows on Adobe Illustrator. So I hope that answers all your questions. I hope that makes making your inner shadows much easier. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where I'm putting a lot of these videos and feedback Friday videos and things like that. Just be super helpful to us to get our subscription numbers up. We'd be able to share more, be able to create more content. So I appreciate you guys and your interest in what we're doing. And if you have any questions, just hit us up on the support page, schoolofracinggraphics.com /support.